Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the Daily Express columnist and broadcaster, Carole Malone, and the editor of the Courier, David Clegg, who joins us here in the studio for the first time.
Fantastic.
He said it was very big, actually.
Yeah, it is a lot bigger than my front room, I can confirm.
Well, a welcome break from that for you anyway. Lovely to have you anyway. So, to the front pages then, let's start with the Metro. She was the light of our lives, the Metro reporting on the death of Eliane Andam, stabbed to death on her way to school. The Mirror also leads with that emotional tribute from Eliane's family. As does The Sun, again, light of our lives. The Eye reporting that private schools plan to use a loophole to avoid Labour's proposed VAT charge. The Prime Minister is facing calls to ditch European courts, according to the Daily Express. The Guardian says the Prime Minister is putting car drivers first in new election battle lines ahead of an announcement on Monday, the paper tells us. The Daily Telegraph also leads with the Prime Minister's plans for drivers, saying Sunak is to block new 20-mile-an-hour zones. The Financial Times leads with reports that ChatGPT creator is in advanced talks with Apple designer Sir Johnny Ive to build their first device. And The Star has a story about Sharon Osbourne, whose son Jack claims she was nearly killed by an evil spirit that ended up putting her in hospital. Carole's laughing. Don't make me laugh.
So are you. She's got a cold. She's going to go.
A reminder, scan the QR code. You can see the front pages while you listen to our guests. So let's head straight to them then. Daily Express, we're going to kick off on, actually, this sort of rumbles on from Suella Braverman's speech in Washington, does it not? Carole, PM facing calls to ditch European courts.
Yeah, it's interesting that this is the Express is my paper saying this, and but I kind of read a story yesterday that said that he was giving Suella the go-ahead to explore what leaving would entail. But we're now reading tonight that they're going to wait until they get the Supreme Court ruling on whether or not we're allowed to deport people to Rwanda. That makes total sense, actually. He wouldn't be leaving the ECHR if he doesn't have to, if we don't have to. But it is interesting that this week. I felt sorry for Suella this week. She's taken a lot of stick this week, and even today she's getting more of it. It's kind of, there's nothing she said in that speech that wasn't actually true. Too much immigration too quickly. She was talking about how the immigration system is broken. And yet it's interesting that some sections of the Liberal left, I'm looking at you, David, some sections of the Liberal left are trying to make it
I've been sitting quietly.
Trying to make it all about what she said about being gay was not enough reason to be granted asylum.
Oh, no, there's much more than that. But anyway, carry on your thought. Yeah.
Well, but there is much more than that. But you wouldn't believe that to listen to what some of the left are saying. But I think there was nothing she said. And she was talking about a global problem as opposed to just a UK problem. And I think it was it was quite a brave speech. And I think Sunak puts her up there to take the flak. And although we hear a lot, say, from the left and saying how vile it was and how racist it was, do you know what I find interesting about the left? They don't seem to like politicians who have brown skin or black skin. They don't think that they should have right-wing views. So people like Pretty and people like Suella get attacked on a regular basis.
Who do you mean there?
No, but it is the generalised left. They think so they attack people like Suella because if she has an opinion on immigration, if she says it's too much, it's almost like they think she shouldn't have that opinion. That because she's the child of migrants, she should be grateful
because she wouldn't necessarily be where she is now if the door had been closed effectively. But the other big matter that people have picked out on is that she said migration and illegal migration is existential for the nation state, which has been picked up on as, jingoistic, right-wing and inflammatory. That's the other part that's really caught people's attention.
But Europe are saying the same thing. Europe are saying that the face of what's the word, culture in those countries will change. And if half of sub-Saharan Africa comes over here, it is going to change the culture of the country. This is a worldwide problem, and it's a problem that's worrying not just people in the UK, but people in Europe and in the US.
Well,
I think there was a lot of generalisations about people and Europe's view and the left's view there, and I think the point about this particular issue about the court is that the political imperative that he has is that he has said he's going to solve the migrant crisis. Nice. They've put all their chips in this plan that, to me, seems a logistical nightmare. Nobody's particularly convinced that it would work, even if it gets a go-ahead. And so there's a lot of different audience in play there. There's the right-wing Tory MPs that just hate that court existentially, don't want to be part of it, and they're agitating about this. Because
it was separate from the European Union and feels still like a hangover of the sovereignty requirements of this nation.
They both have Europe in their name, so they feel they should be together. But on top of that, there's also the political problem. The public are quite keen to get this migration crisis solved as well. I mean, there's no doubt that there is an issue there. We're at 24,000 this year, on target to take over last year's record figure, I think. All he's got is a Rwanda plan, and distracting them by blaming it on the court, having this type of discussion where I'm not sure that he was using Suella Braverman to take the heat, but certainly there's been a fairly, seeming to me, tactical deployment of her speech to cause that uproar, and then a focus now that seems to be on the court. But none of this is going to solve the problem. The essential problem.
I think it will help solve the problem, because I think if the Supreme Court ruling goes the right way for the government, we're not going to be shipping off tens of thousands of people, flying off, I should say, tens of thousands of people. It's going to take 3 or 4 flights. This is a deterrent. This is to stop people getting on the boats in France. And I think if people aren't going to pay $4,000 to get over here, if the minute they get here, they're going to be flown to Rwanda.
Yeah, I know that the Times is reporting tonight that Suella Braverman is facing a cabinet backlash, they say, over her threat to pull the UK out of the European Convention on Human Rights, after warnings it could actually undermine a Supreme Court hearing on the Rwanda policy. So don't run until you can walk is probably what
she's not going to threaten to pull out before the Supreme Court ruling. That's going
and it shows that the Conservative Party are split in that as well. There is some people within the Tories that
hate Suella, basically, and they hate her attitude on immigration. But, I think there's nothing she said in that speech, and nothing that went down badly in Washington that wasn't true. It is a worldwide problem now. Look at Lampedusa last week. 11,000 people arrived there in 5 days in a camp that's destined to take 500 people.
But that is your truth, isn't it? There are many people who think more people should be allowed in this country if they're genuine asylum seekers. But I'm going to move on. Do you mind?
That's another argument if they're genuine asylum seekers.
To the Eye, day 4 or 5 of this story for them, the idea of Labour's policy on private schools and if there's wiggle room for the schools here. David?
So my main thought on this is the private school issue seems to really emotionally resonate in a way where it's important. But you've mentioned the Eye's coverage of it. They've been banging on about it all week. Now, the issue here is what are the technical details of how the Labour Party are going to do this. We've seen they've moved away from charitable status. They're now talking about taking away the VAT exemption. What the Eye is suggesting in its front page tomorrow morning is that head teachers are urging parents to pay their fees up front for years in advance, so that way they will get away without having to pay this extra charge if the Labour Party is elected. Now, that, as well as being quite a fly move, it also suggests it's also crediting head teachers with quite a lot of strategy there. The other issue is that one of the defences we've had for not so much the charitable schools, but the VAT issue is that it isn't just the super rich. It's not just Eton. Yeah. There's middle class, more modestly well-off people that want to give their children a better start in life and are taking up these schools, and they should be supported in doing that. That argument is separate to this. But what I think is certainly the case is if it is right that this is what the schools are suggesting, nobody of modest means is going to be able to pay up front for 7 years of schooling or something like that. So if this is where the argument's going, it does suggest that there's a level of manipulation in that sector, and that maybe that suggests that the Labour Party are right to be thinking, well, what is fair for the private school sector and how much should they be paying their way as if they're any other institution?
I think some of the stuff Labour is currently doing, some of the kind of policies that they're chucking out, I mean, it's almost like they want to lose the next election, because this is going to alienate every single family who've scrimped and scraved and not had holidays and not bought new cars and not gone out to restaurants to send their kids to a private school, because, not because they're snotty, not because they're elitist, but because the state school in their area is not very good. It's overcrowded, it's not working properly. So they use every penny they have to send their kids to a private school. And here's Keir Starmer, the man who's supposed to be taking care of the working classes, punishing those parents who want the best for your kids. Now, I'm not saying that people who can't afford to send their kids to state school don't want the best for their kids. Of course they do. But, you know, this thing that he's saying it's going to make something like
1.7 billion.
1.7 billion, and that's going to go into state schools. Do we believe that? I don't believe it for a second.
Isn't the bigger issue in what you're actually saying, Carole, is that the state schools should be up to a standard where you don't, you know, you're not faced with that dilemma that you have to pay to feel that your kids are going to...
In an ideal world, yes, David, but I mean, that hasn't been happening.
But does it have to be an ideal world? Surely even a moderately acceptable world would have an education system where children...
Yes, but it's not happening. It hasn't happened in this government. It didn't happen in the last one. So, you know, state schools have been problematic for decades now. But I think this policy is spiteful, and he's doing it to appeal to a certain section of his party.
Well, he's doing it because it's a simple maths equation. 93% of families don't send their kids to private schools. So, you know, that's 93%.
No, but this is going to hurt. This is going to turf a lot of kids back into the state system where their education is going to be disrupted and probably will never recover. Okay. And that's not good.
I think it also, just one final thought on it, it does show that this is... If you believe that the policy is right, that private schools should be paying more, it does look like it needs to be a more sophisticated implementation, because that's not going to affect Eton. But there's plenty of smaller independent schools that could really struggle.
Yeah. Lead story for The Guardian, and I think The Telegraph, is what are we going to do about putting drivers first? This is the sort of the tone in The Guardian. Put drivers first. The interests of millions of car owners will go before other policies. And then The Telegraph is talking about the 20-mile-an-hour zones, which Sunak will block new ones. That's what The Telegraph's saying. All ahead of the conference, we understand, on Monday, David.
Yeah, so I think there's two interesting points about this. I think it shows that, again, Rishi Sunak is got a lot bubbling through at the minute. He's throwing everything at it. Clearly, this is going to be a policy-heavy party conference we have coming up, and a lot of it's been trailed already. What strikes me about these particular policies that are being trailed in both The Guardian and The Telegraph tomorrow, which is in particular clamping down on what leeway councils have to implement 20-mile-an-hour zones, to implement what kind of revenue they can drive from traffic infractions, speeding penalties, all this type of thing. Bus lanes is another one. Now, you can see how, if you're a Daily Mail reader who thinks there's a war on the motorist, this is all good red meat for those voters. But it's going to put them at war with some of these local councils who like to have their autonomy on these issues, don't like being told by central government whether they're a Tory council or not, and also depend on a lot of the revenue that they make from some of these things to just fund their basic services. So I think it's quite interesting. It'll be quite interesting to see how that plays out, especially with all the other policies that we've had on similar territory in the last week.
I think like a licence for North Sea oil and the watering down of you know, the progress towards net zero.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's playing a blinder at the moment. I think he's going for certain sections of the people that have strayed from the Tories and that he wants to get back before the election. And I think drivers have been victims of local councils. I mean, I feel like drivers are a cash cow now for local authorities. You know, driving 20 mile an hour on a busy road is stupid. You cause congestion and you cause fumes, you cause toxic, because we're all sitting there. You know, and council, in terms of, you know, putting them at odds with the government, you know, there should be, because councils can't organise most of them, you know what, in a brewery. And it really hacks me off that we are prisoners to their incompetence. So, yeah, OK, so if the government is going to set and try to do it, I mean, we're in my area at the moment, it's 20 miles an hour, there's roadworks everywhere that the local authority hasn't planned, there's chaos where I live, and it didn't need to be. So I think he's playing a blinder here. I think this is good.
The Telegraph also has an interesting suggestion that part of this is being lined up for the party conference because it could deflect attention from the scrapping of that leg of the HS2 rail line.
Yes, which they've avoided because they're in Manchester.